After Andrew Yang suspended his presidential campaign on February 11th, many wondered what he would do next. As we know, he started a nonprofit, Humanity Forward, and became a CNN political commentator. And there's more on the way, but what will it be? Some say he'll stay on with CNN or join a potential Biden administration as a cabinet member, or maybe even replace Mike Pence as Trump's vice president. But if Yang ever wants to become president of the United States, he must become mayor of New York City. Here's why. The main reason Andrew should run for mayor of New York City is people want a president with prior political experience. On the trail, Yang was often questioned on the fact that he hadn't held prior political office and was pressed on whether or not he was qualified or ready to become president.
I want to take this to Mr. Yang. You share the stage, as you know, when we talk about troops in Iraq and Afghanistan with the vice president who was in the Situation Room, with senators who are on the Senate Armed Services, the Foreign Relations Committees, with an Afghanistan veteran who is on the stage tonight. As you share the stage with these candidates, what makes you the most qualified on this stage to be commander-in-chief?
Mr. Yang, you've made a virtue of your outsider status. You've never served in the military or in government. What has prepared you to respond to a terrorist attack or a major disaster?
And we are currently enjoying a businessman president who has no experience in government or the military. What is your argument to people that you will do a better job?
Around the sense that this guy should be running for, New York City Council.
Like Yang said in his interview with Nerds for Yang, he now knows that one crucial factor in getting people's votes is the media portraying you as a viable candidate.
Well, what I realized the main variable was, and what actually the numbers bore out, was that the folks in Iowa and New Hampshire grew to know me, grew to like me, but they did not feel like they had permission to vote for me as president of the United States. That they didn't have that permission structure because in many ways, frankly, like the press narrative that had led up did not cast me as a serious contender. And so what we need to do really is not the work that night, but it's the work like months before, years before, actually, in our case, is to set me up as a credible contender for the White House.
What exactly does he mean by the media giving people permission to vote for a candidate? He means he needs to not be portrayed as random man running for president, or be seen as a choke candidate, as he was for most of the race this time around. Current New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is the perfect example. Although he joined the race late and failed to gain any traction at all, he was not treated as a joke and was given fair time from the media. As we know, if Yang wants to win, all he needs is a fair shot, instead of being forced to claw himself out of an extremely deep hole from the very beginning. Quite simply, the title of New York City Mayor gives him the establishment base and media respect he needs to get his campaign off the ground in the very beginning, instead of being forced to scrap for it for the first year and a half of his candidacy. The second reason is, as Joe Biden is the presumptive Democratic nominee, there are two possible outcomes in November: Trump being reelected or Biden being elected president. First, if Trump is reelected, it would be incredibly difficult for Yang to remain politically relevant and in the public eye for the next 4 years if he is not mayor, possibly forcing him to be in nearly the same position he was when he announced his run in 2018. He'd be polling slightly higher, but still relatively low name recognition, and he will still be seen as the outsider candidate with no political experience. However, most polls have Biden beating Trump by 5 or more points, making it likely he will be victorious in November. As Yang stated in his interview with the Breakfast Club, he would likely have a spot in the Biden administration.
Has Biden promised you a cabinet position?
We've talked, and I'd have a place in the administration is the pretty clear message.
Many Yang supporters feel that this is Yang's best path to the presidency, but I feel very strongly that this is a misguided opinion for a very simple reason. Joe Biden will pick a female vice president.
And I commit that I will, in fact, I'll pick a woman to be vice president. There are a number of women who are qualified to be president tomorrow. I would pick a woman to be my vice president.
As we know, the Democratic establishment, the corporate media, as well as many voters, are clamoring for a woman in the White House. If elected, Biden is very likely to serve only one term and choose not to run for re-election. He would then pass the torch to his vice president to run for re-election in his place, making them the presumptive nominee, as they would be seen as the sitting president running for re-election. This is even more likely to be the case as the two frontrunners for the vice presidential position are former 2020 candidates Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Amy Klobuchar, both of whom are already being rumored as candidates for 2024, vice president or not. If Yang chooses to run against the vice president, he would be portrayed almost as though he was trying to primary the first female president. Third, New York City is now being set up perfectly to showcase exactly how his policies, specifically UBI, can work. After coronavirus, much of New York will be in economic ruin. The poverty rate and unemployment will both skyrocket. People will be in desperate need of help. In an interview with the New York Times shortly after he dropped out of the presidential race, Yang stated that New York City should adopt a permanent universal basic income, saying, "To me, it seems obvious." This makes it almost certain that as mayor, Yang would implement a citywide UBI, which would be huge because it would showcase how the policy will work in real life.
You know, I think there are ways you can always push universal basic income. Like I'm not in an office now, and like I'm finding a way to do it by giving away this money. Mm-hmm. So there, as mayor, I'm sure I could do a lot. As mayor, I bet I could get some people together who still want to run universal basic income pilots right here in New York or in other parts of the country, because like people see it's the future, it's necessary, and unfortunately, this crisis is making it crystal clear to people that we need to act bigger in ways to directly put money into people's hands.
I like that for you. I like Andrew Yang, mayor of New York.
Oh, thanks, man.
I like that.
New York City would also be the perfect place to implement a pilot program of his plan for modernizing voting using blockchain technology. Because of how densely populated and crowded the city is, there are often long lines and other issues plaguing the democratic system in New York City, often in highly minority-populated areas that make it difficult for some to vote.
A lot of voter frustration this midterm election day, and it's not from the rain. Here's a look at a chaotic scene at some polling sites nearly in every New York City borough tonight. In Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx, people standing online, standing their ground, too, not leaving despite the weather and the wait. Some voters waiting hours to cast their ballots, and then facing busted scanners, appearing to be the culprit for many of the voting problems in our area tonight.
These are just a couple of Yang's national policies that, if implemented locally, New York City would greatly benefit from. Also, we know that if he chooses to run, Yang will bring many new and innovative ideas with him, something the city desperately needs.
Run for mayor. Run for mayor. Run for mayor in New York City.